Welcome to the Be Ready podcast, a space for parent, community, and classroom educators to come, learn, and share so that children are strong academically and that they develop into successful, thriving adults. Here are your hosts, and welcome to the conversation.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Be Ready podcast with Dr. Deshawn, Jania, Camila.
Hey.
Today, we are tackling a topic that is so important, that has personal and local and national ramifications, and that is chronic absenteeism, tardiness, truancy. So first, as always, we're going to start with a few definitions. So truancy is missing 15 or more unexcused days of school in a 90-day period. And chronic absenteeism is missing 10% or more of school. It could be excused, unexcused, no matter the reason, of a school year. So there are 180 days in a school year. So being chronically absent means your child or a child has missed 18 days of school in that school year. We have seen that number climb. In 2018 in the United States, that number was at like 15%. And then the pandemic happened. And among the education community, one of the things we said afterwards is like, these kids have not come back to school. What's going on? And everybody related it to the pandemic. But here we are 4 or so years later, and kids still aren't in school. In 2022, that number was 28% of kids were chronically absent. 2023, 25%, 2024, 23%. So it's coming down slowly, but it's not where it needs to be. So let's break it down. Let's talk about what's going on. So ladies, why does missing days of school matter?
Yeah. So first, like legally in the state of Florida, children between the age of 6 and 16 have to be in school. Like that is why it's called truancy, right? There are legal ramifications and implications around your child attending school. And so I want to make sure that we're really clear that truancy and chronic absenteeism are different things. You can have a student that is chronically absent that does not fall in truancy like guidelines. And that's a student that could be missing like 2 days a month, right? So you think about that over 90 days, that's only 6 days that you're being absent, which doesn't sound like a lot. But when you think about the academics that they're missing, even the social skills that they're missing, like that's a huge concern, a huge issue for their success and a huge barrier to their success. And so we can have students that do meet that truancy where they're missing those 5 and 30 days, 10 and 90, 15 and 90. And I say all that because I was a school social worker, so I know all the like legal guidelines of it. And that's a problem. But you also have those students that are maybe like, I want to take 2 mental health days every month, but you're missing a lot of academics if you keep that up. And that's what leads to that chronic absenteeism.
Yep. And I think that's a good segue into like in the teacher's side, right? In the classroom, if a student misses a 30-minute block of instruction, it causes a huge deficit. Sometimes you think about, they were just gone for a little bit, or they were just 10 minutes late. But now the teacher has gone ahead. The assignment is set. They've given the instruction and the students are expected to apply what they're doing. But because the child missed that, now the teacher has to go back if she has time, or pull a separate group, or pull that child aside, or rely on another student's understanding to help that child. Now that's a small block of time. Imagine if they're missing an entire day. In elementary school, an entire day is 5 different subjects. So on the social side and the academic side, them missing any time from school, it creates a serious deficit for where they need to go and what they need to accomplish in order to be successful in school.
Yeah. If you think about a couple episodes ago when we talked about like the summer slide, think about those days happening during the school year, right? And then you have even less time to make up for all of that. So I really like that you said that, Camila, of like somebody has to go back and either teach those things or make sure you get those. and you're thinking about elementary school, you got all 5 subjects in a day. In middle and high school, you may have that teacher on Tuesday and not see them again until Friday. So you have really missed an entire week if you miss those 2 days on kind of like a block schedule or something. Yeah. Yeah.
Jania, I love that you brought up the social aspect of it because I see that in two ways. One, socially, like relationships are important. A sense of belonging is important for a student to do successful in school. And you can't do that. You can't develop those relationships if you're not there with your peers. But also, as a former teacher, I was annoyed with the kids who were chronically absent. And I feel bad saying that. And I'm gonna just say, it was 20 years ago, a little less mature than I am now, but I was annoyed when I had to like get those papers back out and figure out how to reteach it. And I'm responsible, like my paycheck is tied to how you do in school and you're not here, And so I know there are a myriad of reasons why kids are absent from school, but I think it impacts their relationship with their peers and also the relationship with their teachers, which is critical for success. I'm less inclined to help you if I don't feel like you even care about school anyway,
Yeah.
I think there's also school-based implications. So like schools and districts, they're using money, they're getting this money to teach these kids, and they're having to use it to re-engage. So what could you do with money to upscale a learning experience that you're using to re-engage students who aren't there, And then if you look at state budgets, the government is spending this money, but they're not seeing the return on investment because students who are not at school are not testing, or if they are testing, they may not be testing well, which then leads into justification for closing schools. And we see in Orange County, 7 schools are up to be closed,
7 schools, and there are more on the chopping block currently.
Oh, I didn't know that.
There are.
And so I just wonder how being tardy and being absent plays into those things.
It's a lot. And I think it's just like sometimes, like as a parent, we think like it's just a small time, right? It's just one day, but it has it creates such a large hole, right? Because there's so many different layers to it, so many different facets of it. And it's not necessarily that one person is responsible for the entire school, but you just mentioned that chain, right? Like if my students are struggling, then, or I get the money to pay for this, but my students are struggling, but they're struggling because they're not here to learn the content, but then they come on the day that the test is, they're required to take the test. They're failing the test. They have to stay back. That's more money necessary for like retention. They have to have a new teacher because they can't have a second year with the same teacher. The teacher has to be like reading endorsed, and it's so much that goes into it that had I just decided not to go on the cruise after spring break because it was a better sale, then I wouldn't, have to face some of these consequences. And some parents get really, really, really upset if their child is failing, but then they weren't there to receive the instruction, or they have to make up all of the work at the same pace as doing the current work.
Yeah. So think about even some of our students that require like an IEP, right? Or an individual education plan, right? We already know that there may be some skill that they need that additional support with. But if you're not there, you can't get that support. So I've seen many students that we know that there's an academic need there. We know you need this IEP. We know kind of like what we want to put in place, but we can't actually do the testing and we can't get your IQ and we can't do all of these things because you're not there enough. Like that will make or break whether you receive this like IEP, right? And those services. I've got students that have some mental health concerns, right? And they need to be with the social worker or the licensed mental health therapist. Well, if you're not there, we can't give you those services. So then we don't see the kind of progress we do in students that are there every day, right? Or not those chronically absent or truant students. And so they're, yes, missing the academic, but going back to that social piece and some of those mental health needs, like you're missing all of this because you're not in school. And so it's really heartbreaking. Yeah.
So what are some of the reasons? So Camila mentioned the reason, like, I'm going on vacation after spring break because it's cheaper, right?
Mhm.
But I think that's only one reason that kids miss school. So what have you all seen as some reasons?
Yeah.
In different neighborhoods, right? In, like, for example, my son goes to a more affluent school. So those kinds of reasonings we see a lot. Like, we got a good deal on this vacation package, or we're going here. However, at some of the other schools that I personally worked in, we saw a lot of, my mom had to work a double. And so she wasn't there to wake me up. And then when I asked her to take me to school, she was just sleeping. She wouldn't open the door,
Mhm.
right? Because she's sleeping. But that's their livelihood, right?
Yeah.
She has to do that in order to help her kids survive, help them live. When it's raining and I have to walk to school, right? When it's too cold
Yeah.
and I have to walk to school. When my sibling is sick and they're the ones who have to take me to school. Um, uh, Sometimes it's just lack of accountability. Like I used to see in
Mhm.
my older kids, they would be on the phone all night, texting, doing whatever on IG, but didn't set an alarm to wake up in the morning. So,
Mhm.
man, I just missed the bus and I ain't feel like doing all that. And they would literally say that, like, I'm gonna be there tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be transportation. I know that's been an issue for some of my families and students that I've worked with. They're physically not well, right? There may truly be some health concern that is there that they're not at school, but we like the communication piece is what's gonna help there, right? We're definitely seeing a lot of like mental health concerns and reasons why I have anxiety about coming to school, but I can't address that anxiety unless you come to school where the mental health professional is to help you with that, right? So you see kind of how that snowballs. And then like unfortunately, some of it is relationship too, is that I don't feel like there's anybody here at this school that cares about me or that it really is concerned with me. I think in one of my previous roles, I think it was always interesting when I would have a student that was absent to school, but would show up to the after school program. So, like, were you
Mhm.
sick today? Or like, what happened? Right. But some of it came down to I don't think that my teachers like me, but I know that the director at this community center does. And so, like, I know I'm going to get cared for there and loved there. And so, unfortunately, that is on the school, really, that you have made it a space where the student doesn't feel comfortable or seen or heard, and so they don't want to come.
Yeah. What have you seen? What are your thoughts, Deshaun? You seem like you're
Um,
taking it all in, like, man, this is tough.
I'm taking it all in. I feel like I'm hearing some individual, like person-based reasons. So like
Mhm.
school being optional. I'm sick. I don't want to get sick because everybody at school sick. I feel like that's could sometimes be a reason for like younger kids and families and
Mhm.
stuff like that. Um, the mental health piece I think is important, right? Like either I have kids who I don't have good relationships with that bother me at school, so I'm not going. I don't have the relationships with my teachers. I think the only thing I would add is maybe curriculum, right?
Mm.
Like I'm doing things in school that are really just not interesting to me.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And I think we see it a lot in higher ed where people are questioning if higher education is necessary. So
Mm.
it's interesting to hear you guys talk because I'm hearing this trickle down where maybe people overall are considering is education in its traditional
Mhm.
sense necessary and
Yeah.
what else could it look like. I want to educate my child holistically, and
Mhm.
academics is only a small piece of that, and maybe I feel like I can supplement it in other ways, so it
Mhm.
just makes school not as much of a priority. I feel like in communities of color especially, like education has always been like the way to get out, the way to make it, so take school very seriously. And I don't think that that's really the converse, like times have changed. I don't know
Right.
that that's the conversation anymore. um so I think all those things are a factor, but I love that you guys pulled out the systemic thing. So I think the curriculum is a systemic thing. I think
Mhm.
housing and transportation, and working multiple jobs, like those are all community systems problems. So I appreciate that we're having a conversation about both because people love to put it on the family and the communities and not look at how the system at large is contributing to that. Like, we like to include the 0 to 5 population in our conversations. And we say, oh, quality childcare is so important. And it is, but it's also really expensive.
Really?
So am I going to keep my kid at home and try to thug it out? Or am I going to work somewhere only to pay childcare because that's all I can afford,
Right.
It's wild because my sister said something, as you mentioned that the other day, about paying a second rent. And I didn't really think about that. And then I looked at the bill over the month and I was like, dang, this almost costs as much for Caleb to go to daycare than it does for us to live. That's wild. That's wild. How can people afford that? And then there's something else that you mentioned that I wanted to touch on, because I do think that there are some general misconceptions. And I know through OCPS, we have to work we work really hard to correct that. Sometimes we see and hear a lot of misconceptions in terms of elementary is not as important as like high school, because high school is where my attendance and my grades count for graduation. But it's like the flawed thinking, right? The top down, but we gotta get up there first. Right. And elementary, like it had I think the most recent statistics that we explored in OCPS was saying that if a student starts out, right, leaving their their elementary years behind, right, there is a 60% chance that they will not graduate high school. A 60% chance? That's wild. So more often than not, I'm not going to graduate high school in 12th grade because of something that happened in kindergarten through 5th. That's insane. And like when I think about it like that, you think about when I'm building a house, right? I have to have that foundation. And so from the elementary side, that foundation has to be strong, because when you get to middle and high school, they're not teaching you how to read. They're not teaching you how to do some of this stuff. It's assumed, well, you got it there. Now we're just building on it. But if I didn't get it there, then that means like I'm starting at this gap.
Yeah. So Attendance Works is a resource that I used a lot as a community educator, and then when I was a school social worker, and it had a lot of resources to like send newsletters out to parents to say, hey, like I know it's Thanksgiving break and now we've got this week off of school, but like make sure you come back and those sorts of things, right? It's got a lot of toolkits for either like classroom educators or community educators to help have the conversation about why attendance is so important. But one of the facts that it said, which you made me think of, is that poor attendance can influence whether a child reads proficiently by the end of 3rd grade or is held back, which goes right back to your point of once you get to those upper level grades, you're no longer learning how to read. You're reading to understand, right? You're reading to learn. And then it says by 6th grade. So 6th grade. So elementary is pre-K to 5th grade. So by 6th grade, if you're chronically absent, it's a leading indicator whether that student will drop out of high school. So, I mean, you're exactly right. Like your attendance, those 0 to 5th grade is going to really be those building blocks for whether you're going to be able to read, whether you're likely to graduate, whether you decide to go post-secondary or not. But those are a lot of the skills that you need in order to be successful into adulthood. So,
right.
It's really
like
important.
trying to build a building on starting from the 5th floor. How do I get there?
Right.
Or some sand because you didn't get the foundation. Like
or some sand.
Your comments, Camila, literally like made me a little bit emotional because I've been kind of like going through this time with Cameron's teacher where, he transitioned from a private school to a public school. It's a dual language school. So he is, learning your 2nd grade level reading and math, but also Spanish. And so the transition has been a little bit tough and his grades haven't connected with like what I know his aptitude can be. And so like I've had to, from like week 3, I'm texting the teachers like in this new Parent Square app right? Like I'm texting them about things, and I had to be like consistent. And I feel like it wasn't until I was like, hey, I have a doctorate in the field of education, and things are not like going how I think they should go. And I've been in the field for 20 years before I felt like I was really taken seriously, and had to pull in a former colleague who works at the school. And I just like think every parent doesn't have those resources.
Yeah.
Right. And so I wonder what maybe the experience of other kids in the class is. But also, what I keep telling them is I'm not looking at Cam, second grade Cam. I'm looking at Cam, who loves science and was a scientist for Halloween because he loves science so much. And I'm also working at a university that is, branded to be the top producing engineer and innovation technology university in the state of Florida. And I'm looking at these GPA entrance, the SAT entrance scores, and knowing that, college going kids are taking algebra in middle school. And so I'm like, y'all got to get on the ball, because gaps now have future ramifications in middle school, high school, in college, and life. Right. So I think that makes this conversation really important for everybody, for teachers, for administrators, for parents. Like, we cannot let gaps. It makes me really passionate about early childhood, honestly. But we cannot let gaps occur or sit here. We got to be on it, because it's like learning is cumulative, right? If I don't learn numeracy when I'm little and learn how to count, I can recite 1, 2, 3, but I can't pick up 3 things because I don't know what that means. Or I can add. If I don't add well, then I'm not going to be able to multiply. And so all those things build, and we can't let those gaps occur. So I'm glad that one of y'all brought up like how kids are missing a lot of school in elementary, and that is not the place to miss.
Yeah. But I think you, like, the way that you explained it also really like made me think, like, kids' school experience, K-12, or even before that, is a puzzle. If it's missing pieces, then I don't have the whole picture. So I don't know exactly what this is supposed to be. I'm ready to go to college now, but I love science. But do I know my full potential in science? Do I feel successful in science? Because maybe I have some gaps other places, but I know I really love it and I want to do it, but I'm not confident enough. And I now don't have the full picture of qualifications to be able to pursue that beyond.
Exactly. That said, I am not letting a second grade classroom steal his dream, baby. No, we ain't doing that.
We not either. Okay. Just saying.
Yeah.
So what are some solutions? What's worked in your experience? What are educators talking about?
So right now in Orange County, principals were tasked with getting out there in social media, making commercials, posting on their websites, incentives in the school. And I'll say from just experiences that I've seen, there have been probably at all the schools that I've supported, just even this year, every single school has some sort of attendance challenge by grade, by teacher, when they get motivation, which grade level is the attendance leader, had all their kids there today, they get an extra Roar ticket, and they can go to the Roar store. And every week on Parent Square at my son's school, at Lucas's school, it's at least 3 or 4 grades that tie for the most. And I'm talking about like 95% of the kids coming. So I think that there needs to be like motivation. I have never been a fan of like punishment for attendance, because especially like when you're young, how do you gauge that? I don't drive myself to school. So why am I getting punished because my mom couldn't take me this day, or our car was broken down, or I'm sick? Like, so I've seen this year in particular a lot of traction in and forward movement with the positive incentives that have happened.
Yeah. I mean, I love a good incentive. I think we also have to get back to like building those relationships that encourage everybody coming to school, whether it is the teacher coming to school, like, or the students coming to school. I think sometimes it is easy for us to get in this space of, oh, their parents just don't care, right? And I'm specifically thinking about like middle schoolers, right? Where middle school is middle school. We've all been there. It's a different time, right? Kids get a little bit more freedom. They're feeling themselves or not feeling themselves, as when we see some of those like mental health challenges come out a little bit more. And you're changing classes so much more than you were in elementary school, right? And so teachers are overstimulated. They're changing every 45 minutes, if maybe a little bit longer, but they're overstimulated, right? And so teachers are overstimulated, so are students. And so we have to get into this place where it is a calm place for everyone to be, where everybody acknowledges the hustle and bustle of it, but we're still able to build those true, authentic connections that make students want to come to school. Like, I love coming to school after a break and kids telling me about what happened over the break and me like having genuine interest in your life. Do I think every educator does that? No. Do I know that? Yes, because kids will tell on other teachers and be like, I don't want to go to their class because they don't like me. And they say it in other colorful words. But I think it's really important for us to remember that they're kids and that they don't know what they want yet. They're children, right? I do believe that parents want the best for them, but parents are also dealing with their own things as well. And so we kind of, again, have to stand in that gap and make sure we're building that relationship where like students want to come to school. We have to take each student individually too, and thinking about some like PJI principles of like turning to wonder, why is the student not coming to school? Let's really do a deep dive here. Let's really take the time and be intentional. While we know that there are some systemic things, there are also individual things. And so how do we tackle those together as a team? And then I think community educators having those conversations with parents about why it's important that your student go to school. Yes, I want them to be here in my community space, but I also want them to go to school, and we can get incentives on that end too, right? Of like you being able to do things, but also having that conversation with parent about how many days the student is missing, and then encouraging them and telling them why it's important. Because sometimes hearing that from the school, it is in that punitive state, right? Like you get a letter from the school when your student has missed so many days, and they're like, "Come to school." Hopefully, somebody has called you before then, but maybe they haven't. And so the more that the community can do too about helping parents understand why that's important, helping students understand why that's important, I think will help us see some of those things shift.
Yeah. You know what that reminds me of, Jania? Remember the episodes where we talked about like it taking a village, right? Yeah. And thinking about like, this is another topic, but social emotional learning was taken from the curriculum, right? All things had to be removed. But the teachers, it kind of fell on them to consider what they needed to do in their class beyond the academics so that the academic piece could be achieved. For the teachers who don't, these are not the teachers, in my opinion, these are people who show up to teach. It became I'm just going to come for my paycheck. They said I can't do that. I'm just going to stick to this book, stick to this. And so my class is just a class. It's not made up of 18 to 20 different bodies who have different needs, right? Think about some experiences like over the past few weeks with one of my colleagues and the fight she had to just be able to meet with her teacher. And it made me, it triggered my PTSD from Lucas.
Yeah.
Right? And then it made me think about that. But then the teacher explicitly told her, because of her knowledge level, she didn't want to meet with her. She wanted to have her just trust that things are going on. Correct. And the principal,
I can't trust you. I don't have a relationship with you. Like, you won't even talk to me. How am I going to trust?
Correct.
Sorry, keep going.
Then the principal not wanting to rock the boat with her teacher offered to be the intermediary, but then when they had, and she went along with it, when it was time for to have a conference, the principal showed up, she showed up, and the teacher didn't. But the teacher sent a text saying she's not comfortable being in that presence. So
relationship,
like all the it's the relationships all around, right? And it's me thinking about that experience, and it's me as a teacher thinking like, put my stuff aside. Like, I'm here for this child, and this child who you're expressing has learning difficulties, and when you're asked to be accountable for that, now because you know that I know my stuff, you don't want to say anything, you don't want to talk to me, and you explicitly say that you don't. This is where that village is starting to break down, and then this is why we're having, or this is one of the reasons why we're having some of those issues with students even wanting to be there, right? Or kids even wanting to, not kids, parents even wanting to bring their kids, and like it just, it's creating something systemic that's going to keep going. And now that's wild.
I just want to run that back real quick because you said it and then you moved on.
Yeah.
Let me say it again because I know what you got to say. Okay.
There are teachers and then there are people who show up to teach.
Correct.
Like that deserves a little bit of recognition.
Yes.
Because
sadly in a on a daily basis in my role, I definitely see the difference. And we just recently did the Instructional Leadership Institute, and the most recent statistic said that more than 61% of people who teach didn't even go to school for it. Like that's they just fell into this. That's 61%. We all looked at each other like, oh my goodness. But then I sat at a table with a principal who had 3/4 of her teachers out of field. Well, so,
Jenny, I also liked your idea about how community educators can contribute to the conversation by encouraging school attendance, because I think who the message comes from matter, right? Like the principal, I don't really know you, it might sound punitive because they're probably giving me facts. The teacher, I think that would be a great credible messenger. But also, depending on if it's a teacher or someone who's showing up to teach, they might be annoyed or not annoyed. So delivery might matter. But usually, like I, in my experience, have found that the community educators have the better relationships with the students and with the families. So thinking about ways that schools can partner with these community spaces and have, agreements to share data or updates or, things like that. To be able to share attendance information, I think is really important. I also think as parents sometimes we need help, right? Like the village matters. And I wonder about if it's possible for parents to agree for community educators who they trust to receive education information about their kids, to be able to step in as an advocate and help to mediate those conversations and, receive some of those updates around like attendance and things like that, just to strengthen that village, right? Because if you're working a lot or if you're doing it alone, you can't do all these things by yourself, especially if you have multiple kids. It's just not even possible.
Yeah. I think there are a couple of ways that can work, right? I've definitely had community directors that have access to like the Skyward and can call the school and they're on like the person list, right? The safe person list. I also think depending on how old the student is too, like that community educator can ask the student, like, can you pull up your Skyward or whatever the attendance tracking like piece is? And like, I trust you, so I'll have this conversation with you. I know for like our football team, it is hey, we'll highlight you if you can show us that you've been going to school, right? Those sorts of things. So I think we have to be creative in how we do that. But I definitely think there are a lot of ways that community educators, because it may be a lot for you to be like, I'm going to check these 60 children's like attendance record, but giving them some accountability in it, figuring out ways that you can incentivize it, ways that you can celebrate them going to school. I think that's always really important. So community educators being creative around it, but also them even knowing that your student, they have to be in school, and they have to be in school, yes, legally, but also the academic like breakdown of that. Yeah.
So like, as if we can establish that strong village, right, then that's one of the biggest ways that we can start to kind of, close that gap and make that forward progress. So like as parents, we can do some of the things like that I know we talked about, go back to the episode, that predictable routine, right? Communicating with the school early and often. Like it doesn't have to be that the only time you speak to your kid's school is like when there's an issue, right? Keep in contact, because then it'll make them want to keep in contact more with you because they know that you're trying to help, right? But always speak your truth, right? There has to be like a little bit of like advocation. Is that a word? Advocating.
Advocacy.
Advocacy. I like that one.
Whatever you want.
You rolling, we get it. Keep going.
We know what you mean.
There has to be that advocacy as a parent, as your child's biggest advocate. Say what your truth is, speak it, and document it, because the people who are also there need to be held accountable as well, right? So as a parent, like it's a big job already, but we have to do what we need to do to have our kids at the forefront of everything. And to close this gap, we need to tighten it up a little bit in that respect.
Amen, amen, amen. Any last closing words?
No. Come to school, everybody.
Why we both say go to school. Go to school.
I know. I really enjoyed this conversation. I feel like there's also some areas I want to dive into a little bit more, especially the systemic things, because it's really, I feel like there's levels to it, right? There's I don't feel like going to school today, I'm sick, or I don't feel like going to school today. But there's like people who are really struggling and really have issues, especially now, when more people are hurting financially, and
it's not safe.
Right? Like we go to a school with a high immigrant population, and that car line, we've been zipping through that car line. I'm like, where are all the families? And then it dawned on me, it's not even safe right now for some people to go to school. So I think, so encouraging, if we can go to school, go to school. If you work with parents and can think of creative ways to help them get their kids to school, do all you can. But I think a future conversation needs to be about the way that like policy and stuff impact school attendance. And I don't know that people, want to talk about that. It's easier just to blame families, and that's not really fair.
Yeah, right. It's not fair. It's not accurate either. Yeah.
All right. So to be continued, I guess we could say. But anyway, thanks for watching. Be Ready Podcast on YouTube. Like, listen, share, subscribe, and talk to you next month.
Bye. See you at school.
Bye.